much for having me. If you were to take out a piece of paper right now by chance and draw a tree, what would that tree look like? For a lot of us, that tree might look kind of like maybe a popsicle stick, like a big mass and then a straight line going down. Maybe you would give that line some roots down below. But that's in general what we think about as what a tree is, what our concept of a tree is. It looks kind of like that, right? But when we get into that question of like, okay, this thing looks like a tree. It has a tree-like shape. Do we consider it a tree? And if you are familiar with this plant at all, this is a Dracaena Draco, the Canary Islands dragon tree, which is more closely related to a houseplant than a lot of the trees we have in our landscape. In fact, this is its closest relative here in Idaho, which you're going to find in your house and not in the landscape. So there are things that look like trees. Are they trees? We can argue about that. Botanists definitely go back and forth about the definition of a tree, but there really is no one standard botanical definition of trees. There's instead like a collection of descriptions, a lot of adjectives that we assign to trees. So let's put some of those to the test here with our Canary Islands dragon tree. Trees are woody. That makes sense, right? So they have wood components to them. Trees are complex, so they're not, really simple organisms. They have a lot of systems, and even the wood itself, the compounds within that wood are very complex. If you've ever looked at the molecule that is lignin, it is very complex. There's a lot of parts and pieces to that molecule. So even from like a chemical standpoint, a molecular standpoint, trees are really, really complex creatures. They're long-lived. So they're usually not annuals, right? They're perennials, and they tend to be long-living perennials. So some hundreds and hundreds of years. Trees feed themselves. So like other plants, they are autotrophs, meaning they get their food from the sun using their, photosynthesis in their leaves. And they're compartmentalizing, which is a concept that I think is really important. Essentially, trees um, seal, they don't heal. So trees seal up over their wounds. They grow what we call reaction wood to seal up over injuries and wounds and when branches break off, things like that, or when we make pruning cuts, they compartmentalize that tissue. They don't heal that tissue the way that like a scab heals on our skin. That's not what trees do. They have a completely different way of both defending themselves against pests and diseases and um, uh, compartmentalizing that tissue so that they can regrow in other ways. But we call that reaction wood or compartmentalization here. Entries are ultimately, they're members of the plant kingdom, so they are, similar to other perennials out there, but live and exist in a lot of different families within the plant kingdom. So there isn't like, one tree family. There's multiple different families, and trees have evolved over time in like different areas of the plant kingdom. So again, there isn't just, one ancestor that then led to all trees out there. There are many different lineages that are basically taking advantage of the same kind of lifestyle and the same way of being, not one single origin and then all trees stem from there. So we can argue a lot about, okay, is that a tree? Is it not a tree? Is it a shrub? What is this creature here that's in front of us? But ultimately, broadly speaking, would trees share these components? And speaking of their components, they're made up of, the same things that a lot of our favorite plants we know in our yards are. They have shoots, they have leaves coming off of those shoots, they have a root system powering all of that activity. And then for reproduction, they have flowers, and that could look like fruits or could look like cones or seeds. And we kind of group trees into two different categories here. Um, we have the conifers, right? Coniferous plants. We sometimes refer to those as evergreens. And our coniferous plants are also known to botanists as gymnosperms. So these are ancient trees that were around in the time of the dinosaurs, and they have seeds that kind of either are exposed to the wind or water. They're not pollinated by pollinators. They're just out there in the environment, like a pine cone releasing its seeds, naked into the environment, spreading those seeds into the wind. Whereas our broadleaf plants and our broadleaf trees, for the most part, are flowering species. A lot of them are pollinated by pollinators, so bees, butterflies, mostly bees though. Uh, but some are pollinated still by wind, by water, things like that. So we have this example here of a birch tree that is wind pollinated, um, but it technically keeps its seeds enclosed in a fruit, which I know is weird to think about broadleaf plants being enclosed in a fruit, but they are. Those are technically fruits there, and different trees will have different types of fruits that and different types of flowers as well. Some will have male flowers and female flowers. Some will have those things combined into one flower. There's lots of different ways of being a tree and reproducing, creating your offspring. But we do have these two broad categories here. We've got our conifers, which have needles and scales. They're kind of pokey, right? Sometimes. And then we have our broad-leafed trees, which have those flexible leaves that are shed at a certain time of year, theoretically. So we're going to come into some exceptions here. If you recognize this tree right here, you might have seen this in Idaho. It's one that I really love. This is the larch or tamarack that does turn a color at a certain time of year. It is actually a deciduous tree, so it drops its needles at the end of the year. But again, two different ways of talking about trees. We have deciduous trees that drop their leaves or needles seasonally, so they drop them at the end of the year. And then we have evergreen trees that drop their leaves kind of gradually throughout the year. We can have coniferous deciduous trees like the larch that is a conifer that drops its needles. We can also have broadleaf evergreen trees like the southern magnolia that drops its leaves throughout the year and retains them throughout the wintertime. So that's a broadleaf evergreen tree again. So big categories of trees. We defined what trees are a little bit.